If tensions between Russia and NATO escalate, the world may be standing at the brink of a new landscape, one shaped by shifting alliances, economic shocks, military posturing, and humanitarian risks. Today we explore what might happen if this rivalry turned hot. What would the immediate consequences be? How far would the ripple effects reach? How would ordinary lives be changed? Let's dive in. Russia and NATO already exist in a state of uneasy confrontation. NATO has expanded eastward since the end of the Cold War. Russia views this expansion with deep suspicion. NATO, for its part, sees Russia's recent military aggressions in Ukraine by airspace incursions, cyber attacks as threats to European stability. The question is not if tensions exist, they already do, but if they escalate into open conflict, what follows? First, military escalation would be almost immediate at the border. Countries like Poland, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia would be on high alert. Air defense systems would be activated, reinforcements mobilized. NATO member forces in Eastern Europe would be bolstered. Russia might respond by moving troops, deploying missile batteries, conducting military exercises, even launching drone strikes. Civilian airspace could be disrupted. Nobody wins from missile misfires or accidental cross-border incidents, but in a climate of tension, such accidents are possible. Second, the energy markets would be jolted. Europe still imports a lot of its natural gas and oil, and while efforts have been made to reduce dependence on Russian energy, many countries remain vulnerable. If pipelines are threatened, or if Russia chooses to shut off supply, energy prices globally would spike. Fuel costs would rise rapidly. Heating bills for households in Europe would soar. Manufacturing that relies on energy or chemical inputs could slow down or shut temporarily. Food prices could increase because of higher transportation and energy costs. Even countries far from the conflict, like those in Asia or Latin America, would face inflation from rising energy costs. Third, global trade routes and supply chains would feel the impact. Shipping routes in the Baltic Sea, Arctic, or through Russia's far north could become dangerous. Ports might be targeted or restricted. Companies may reroute ships, avoid certain sea lanes, or incur heavy insurance costs. The flow of semiconductors, rare earth minerals, metals, consumer goods all could be disrupted. Manufacturing in many countries depends on just-in-time supply lines. Delays accumulate. Costs rise. Stock markets respond with volatility as investors react to risk. Fourth, the economic fallout would be massive. Sanctions, counter-sanctions, tariffs, all become tools of statecraft. Already, many NATO nations have imposed sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. Many have sought to reduce reliance on Russian energy. In case of open conflict, sanctions would expand on finance, trade, technology flows. Russia might cut off or reduce energy exports. NATO countries might freeze Russian assets, restrict trade, limit technology exports. Russia may retaliate, targeting supply lines, cyber infrastructure, even foreign businesses. Investors would pull back. Emerging markets with close trade ties would suffer. Inflation everywhere. Recession risk in Europe and possibly globally. Countries that rely on Russian energy or trade would be especially exposed. Fifth, cyber warfare and information warfare would intensify. Russia has already used cyber tactics, hybrid warfare, disinformation campaigns to undermine public trust, destabilize politics in Europe and elsewhere. In a heightened conflict, attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, communication networks, water supplies could become common. Internet blackouts, surveillance, state propaganda could increase. Misinformation could spread quickly. Civilians might become more fearful, governments more secretive. If passports, identity systems, or banking systems are disrupted, the ripple of fear is immediate. Sixth, humanitarian consequences would grow. Civilians in border regions could be forced to flee or shelter in place. Refugee flows into neighboring countries like Poland, Finland, maybe even further west would increase. Hospitals, schools, and homes could be damaged or destroyed. Shortages of food, clean water, medical supplies may occur. Mental health crises could become widespread. Displacement on a large scale triggers long-term social challenges. Housing, integration, public services. Countries hosting refugees would need resources. The international aid community would be under pressure. Seventh, political alignment and alliances worldwide might shift. Countries historically neutral or non-aligned may feel compelled to pick sides or at least shift their policies. Nations in Asia, Africa, Latin America might revisit their relationships with Russia or NATO powers. China, which has ties to Russia, may either double down on its partnerships or engineer a balancing act. Smaller powers may seek security guarantees. Defense spending globally may rise. Countries in NATO might call for greater collective defense measures. Moscow may push for alliances or exploit divisions among NATO members. Eighth, nuclear risk and escalation cannot be ignored. Russia possesses a large nuclear arsenal. NATO, though conventional superior in many respects, also depends on nuclear deterrence. If conflict escalates, the possibility of tactical nuclear weapons use or threats thereof might rise. Mutual deterrence works only if both sides believe that aggression will incur unacceptable cost. Miscalculations, accidents, or miscommunication could lead to catastrophic escalation. Civil society and global institutions would be deeply alarmed. Ninth, legal, diplomatic, and normative consequences. International law, treaties, and conventions would be under the microscope. Violations of sovereignty, civilian harm, use of force, all would spark legal challenges. The United Nations, International Court of Justice, and other bodies would come under pressure to act. War crimes investigations, public documentation of actions, and human rights concerns would dominate media coverage. Diplomatic fallout could isolate countries. National reputations, trade relationships, foreign investment climates could shift dramatically based on perceived legal legitimacy. 10th, for ordinary people, life may change in concrete day-to-day ways. Heating costs in cold climates may increase. Commuting or travel may be disrupted. Airline tickets may become expensive. Consumer goods may cost more due to supply chain disruptions. Insurance rates may go up. Governments may prioritize national security spending over health, education, or infrastructure spending. Budget deficits may grow. Stock portfolios could lose value. The fear factor can also sway public opinion. Politics may become more polarized internally. Civil liberties and surveillance debates may intensify. 11th, global food security can become a major concern. Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of wheat, corn, sunflower oil, and other staples. If trade disruption continues or expands to include sanctions or blockades, food supply to vulnerable countries, especially in North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, could suffer. Prices of staples could increase dramatically. People in countries heavily dependent on imports may face shortages or hunger. 12th, environmental risks may rise. Warfare often brings collateral damage, including environmental contamination, destruction of ecosystems, damage to water sources, deforestation, or destroyed infrastructure that takes years to rebuild. Nuclear plants, chemical plants, or oil infrastructure may be hit or threatened, raising risk of environmental disaster. Climate policy may take a back seat, diverted by urgency of crisis. 13th, migration and global demographics could shift. As people flee conflict zones, refugee flows could increase, not just to neighboring countries, but potentially beyond. Migration pressures can change demographics in Europe, Middle East, Asia. Integration challenges, cultural tensions, economic strain, social service pressures may rise. 14th, global markets and investor confidence would be shaken. The financial ripple from war includes capital flight to safe assets, flight from risky markets, currency fluctuations, especially in Eastern Europe and emerging markets. Safe haven assets like U.S. Treasuries, gold, and Swiss franc may surge. Stock indices may dive. Foreign investment may reduce in regions perceived as unsafe. 15th, impact on energy transition and climate goals. Countries may accelerate renewable energy adoption to reduce dependency on vulnerable energy supply routes. Alternatively, short-term energy supply concerns may slow down climate initiatives. Fossil fuels may get temporarily more investment for security reasons. Subsidies, research, and infrastructure investment may change direction. 16th, media, public opinion, and global perception. News outlets will spotlight every move. Public reaction matters. Protests, opinion polls, social media activism may influence foreign policy. Governments may face internal pressure to act. Some nations may seek peace, others may ratchet up militarization, depending on domestic politics. 17th, over time as this conflict unfolds, there could be a new global security architecture, perhaps more regional defense pacts, perhaps new multilateral groups focused on safeguarding shipping lanes, cybersecurity, energy transit. Countries might revise foreign policy priorities. Some global institutions might reform treaties or create stronger enforcement mechanisms. International cooperation could either deepen or break, depending on how leadership responds. 18th, psychological and cultural impacts. Fear, nationalism, distrust would grow. People may view neighbors, immigrants, or foreign media with suspicion. Populations may support harsher security policies. Immigration and refugee discussions may become more tense. Press freedom, civil liberties may suffer in places where governments respond to threat perception with greater control. 19th, even technological development would shift. Military technologies such as missile defense, unmanned systems, satellite intelligence, AI surveillance may receive accelerated investment. Governments may prioritize defense R&D. Civil applications may see spillover, surveillance tech, real-time border monitoring, secure communications. Finally, while much of this sounds grim, paths to de-escalation exist. Diplomacy, back-channel negotiations, multilateral pressure, and international mediation could prevent conflict. Confidence-building measures, arms control treaties, transparency, and communication channels to avoid miscalculations will be essential. Public awareness, media responsibility, and civil society engagement play a role in pointing leaders toward peace rather than confrontation. What the world stands to lose if this conflict ignites is enormous. Stability, trust among nations, economic growth, human lives. But what is also possible is that such a crisis forces global systems to adapt, alliances to be stronger, policies to be more resilient. We must hope for that outcome and prepare mentally and politically so that if tensions rise, we respond with wisdom, humanity, and resolve.